Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive.
Hello. Good to be diving in again.
So today we're tackling something I think really resonates with a lot of you listening.
I think so too.
It's that feeling, you hear a native English speaker and their words just seem to, well, they flow, they dance together. It sounds so smooth.
Effortless is the word that often comes up. Like they aren't even thinking about it.
Exactly. Effortless. And immediately you think, okay, how can I make my English sound like that? You want that smoothness, that natural quality.
Right. Less like you're translating in your head, maybe more organic.
Yeah, more organic, smoother. That's the aspiration we keep hearing about.
And look, it's a completely common goal. Totally understandable. We often hear from learners who feel like, okay, they've got a good handle on grammar, they know a lot of vocabulary.
Right, they've put in the work on the building blocks.
Exactly. But there's still this gap, between the English they produce and the fluid, almost musical way native speakers seem to talk.
It's like having all the right ingredients, but maybe not quite knowing the technique to combine them perfectly.
That's a great analogy. You have the notes, but maybe not the rhythm or the phrasing that makes it sound like music.
For sure. And, for a long time, the sort of standard advice, or maybe just the assumption was, well, you had to go live there.
Total immersion. That was seen as the gold standard, the only way, really.
Yeah, pack your bags, move to the US, the UK, Australia, wherever, live there for years, and just kind of soak it up, absorb it through daily life.
And don't get us wrong, living abroad is fantastic for language learning. The amount of exposure and practice is huge, no question.
Definitely helpful, yeah.
But the sources we've been digging into for this deep dive, they make a really compelling case that while immersion is great, it's absolutely not the only path.
That's the key takeaway here. It's not the only way.
No. These sources lay out actual concrete techniques, a kind of framework, really, for training your ear and, crucially, your mouth to mimic those native patterns. And you can do it from anywhere.
It puts the control back in your hands, which is really empowering.
It really does.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We've gone through these sources, articles, guides, linguistic insights, and we're pulling out the most actionable stuff for you. The tools you can use to basically become your own coach for sounding more natural.
We're going to unpack how to listen differently, more actively.
Right, that focused listening. Then we'll get into techniques like shadowing, literally copying the sounds.
And building up your stock of those everyday, natural phrases native speakers actually use.
We'll also flag some common mistakes, things you want to steer clear of.
Definitely important. Avoid those pitfalls.
And we'll even touch on the sort of cultural side of things, how the way we speak English carries meaning.
So think of this as your practical guide, based on what these sources reveal, to understanding and starting to acquire that music of native English.
It's about getting really specific, right? Not just understanding the words, the what, but the how.
Precisely. How is it said? Why do those tiny differences in pronunciation or rhythm or the way words link together make such a huge difference in how natural you sound?
And most importantly, how can you consciously work on these things?
That's the goal. Actionable steps.
Okay, let's dig in. So the sources really hammer this home. Before you can even think about producing natural English sounds and rhythms, you got to learn to hear them properly first.
Yes. It starts with listening, but a different kind of listening.
So core strategy number 1, the power of observation and really, really focused listening.
This is absolutely fundamental. Think about how most people listen when learning a language. You're listening for meaning.
Yeah, you're trying to understand what's being said, following the story, getting the information.
Exactly. You're decoding the words.
Yeah.
But the sources we looked at, they stress that to improve your sound, your pronunciation, your naturalness, you need to shift your focus.
How so?
You need to become like a detective of delivery, not just focusing on the definition of the words, but how they are delivered, the sound itself.
Okay, so listening for the texture, the shape of the sound, the feeling.
Exactly, the acoustic properties. And the sources highlight some specific elements to really tune your ear into. The first one is tone.
Tone. Okay, not just like high pitch, low pitch.
But pitch is part of it, but it's broader. It's the overall quality, the emotional color the speaker puts into their voice.
Yeah.
How does their voice, say, rise or fall at the end of a thought? Does it sound kind of flat, robotic? Or does it have energy, warmth, maybe sarcasm?
Right, the feeling behind the words.
Precisely. One source, I think it was from an applied linguistics journal, gave a brilliant, simple example. Just the word okay.
Okay.
Right? If I just say it's flat, okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Maybe I'm just acknowledging something. Maybe I'm hesitant.
Yeah, kind of neutral or even slightly negative, maybe.
Could be. Now, if I say okay, with my voice going up at the end.
That's a question, like, are you sure or do you agree?
Exactly. Asking for confirmation. Now, what if I say okay with a bright falling tone, maybe a bit louder?
That sounds enthusiastic, like, yes, let's do it, or sounds great.
Totally. So, see? Same word. Okay.
Yeah.
But the tone, the intonation, completely transforms the meaning and the feeling it conveys.
Wow, yeah. Just in one word.
And native speakers do this constantly. These subtle shifts in tone add layers and layers of meaning, emotion, attitude, often completely unconsciously. Learning to hear those nuances is step one.
That makes sense. And that probably ties directly into the next thing the sources mention, rhythm.
Absolutely connected. English has what linguists call a stress-timed rhythm.
Stress-timed. What does that mean exactly? Not like every word gets the same beat.
Exactly, not like that. In English, certain syllables or words get stressed. They're pronounced louder, maybe held a tiny bit longer, often higher in pitch, and other syllables or words get reduced, unstressed, swallowed almost.
Okay, so it's not like a steady beat, like tap, 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 tap for every syllable.
No, it's more like a syncopated rhythm. Dot, 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 dot.
Dot, dot.
Dot, dot, dot. Think about a simple sentence. I want to go to the store. If I really stressed every word like that, it sounds unnatural, right?
Yeah, very robotic, stiff.
A more natural rhythm would emphasize the important words, the content words like want, go, store, and kind of rush over the little function words like to in the, I want to go to the store. Hear that?
Yeah, definitely. Want to go to the store. Much smoother. The to, the almost disappears.
Right. That creates the characteristic rhythm, the music of English, as one language learning blog we looked at called it.
That's a good way to put it, the music.
It really is. And if your native language has a different rhythm, say a syllable-timed rhythm, where each syllable gets roughly equal time, like Spanish or French often do, and you transfer that rhythm to English, it can sometimes sound a bit choppy, or machine gun-like was a phrase used.
Ah, okay. So learning the English stress pattern, knowing which words usually get the emphasis, nouns, main verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and which usually get reduced, articles, prepositions, auxiliary verbs, is key to getting that natural flow.
It's absolutely crucial. It provides the underlying beat, the framework for everything else.
Okay, so we've got tone, we've got rhythm. What's next? This seems like maybe the biggest one the sources kept circling back to. Connected speech.
Oh, absolutely critical. This is the glue that holds fluent speech together. Connected speech is basically how words merge, link, and even change sounds when they bump up against each other in a sentence.
So we don't actually speak with tiny little pauses between every single word.
Not at all. If you did that, pronouncing every word distinctly like, I want to go to the store,
Yeah.
it would sound incredibly unnatural, very slow, very deliberate, maybe even condescending in some contexts.
Right, like you're talking to a child or something.
Exactly. A research paper on phonetics we reviewed made this point very strongly. Connected speech isn't lazy speaking or sloppy speaking.
Which is maybe a common misconception.
Could be. But it's actually an efficient and totally fundamental characteristic of fluent spoken English. It's what helps maintain that rhythm and flow we were just talking about.
Okay, give us some examples. The sources must have had plenty.
Oh, tons. The absolute classic mentioned everywhere is, what are you doing?
Right. You almost never hear a native speaker say, what are you doing? Nice and clearly like that in casual conversation.
Almost never. It gets smushed together. You hear, what you doing?
Whatcha? So the T and what and the Y and U kind of merge into a cheese sound.
Exactly. That's called assimilation. And the R often gets reduced to just or sometimes disappears completely. What you doing? Or you might hear, what I doing?
What? Okay. The T in what becomes more like a did sound before the U.
Right. Another common change. It depends a bit on accent and speed, but the point is the words connect and sounds change.
What's another big one?
I don't know.
Yeah, universally mentioned.
Yeah. If I say I don't know, very clearly.
Sounds like you're maybe being very emphatic or maybe a bit annoyed or just speaking incredibly slowly.
But the normal way is,
I don't know.
I don't know. Right. The T sound in don't just vanishes before the key sound in no.
It often gets dropped, yeah. It's called illusion. The word don't itself gets reduced. I don't know. Quick and smooth. And these aren't just weird exceptions, right? The sources said this happens all the time.
Constantly. Think about going to.
Becomes gonna. I'm gonna go.
Want to.
Wanna. I wanna learn.
Did you?
Did you? Did you see that? Give me a break.
Have to.
Have to.
Have to finish this.
Gotta go.
See? It's systematic. These aren't mistakes. They are predictable features of natural spoken English.
And the sources pointed out that, okay, maybe as a learner, you find these confusing at first because gonna isn't how going to is spelled.
Right, it can be a challenge for listening comprehension initially.
But understanding these and eventually starting to use them appropriately is essential for sounding natural. If you pronounce every single word in "I am going to go to the store" fully,
It sounds stilted, textbooky.
but if you say "I'm going to go to the store," using those connections and reductions,
Instantly sounds more fluent, more native-like.
So the message from the sources was crystal clear on this. Things like reductions, gonna wanna, linking sounds between words like the becoming sheet in watcha, dropping sound. No, they aren't just optional extras you can ignore.
No, they are baked right into the sound system of everyday spoken English. Noticing them when you listen and then consciously trying to incorporate them into your own speech is a massive step toward sounding more natural.
Okay, so let's recap this first big strategy. It's about changing how you listen, fundamentally.
Moving beyond just listening for the meaning of the words.
You need to actively tune your ear to the sound itself. When you're watching a movie, listening to a song, hearing a conversation, listening to this deep dive,
Lean in, focus. Don't just follow the plot or the main points.
listen for that music. Where does the voice go up? Where does it go down? Intonation.
Where are the strong beats? Where are the weak ones? Rhythm.
Where do words seem to melt together? Where do sounds disappear or change? Connected speech.
Actively hunt for those gunnas and wannas and didges. Notice where they happen.
One source put it nicely. It said, you're training your ear to recognize the ingredients of natural speech.
Yeah, I like that. You can't cook a dish if you don't know what the ingredients look and taste like. You can't reproduce natural speech if you can't first perceive its components accurately.
So it's moving from just consuming English to actively analyzing its physical properties, its sound signature.
Exactly. Critical first step.
Okay, so let's say your ear is starting to get tuned in. You're beginning to notice these features, the tone, the rhythm, the connected speech. What's the next step? You can't just listen forever.
Right. Now you have to move from hearing it to actually producing it yourself. Active practice.
And this is where the sources really converged on one specific, powerful technique. It's called shadowing.
Shadowing. Yeah, this came up again and again as probably the most direct, hands-on way to start acquiring those natural pronunciation patterns, rhythms, and intonation contours.
So what is shadowing exactly? It's not just repeating after someone, right?
It's a bit more intense than that. The core idea isn't just waiting for the speaker to finish a sentence and then repeating it. It's trying to speak along with them or immediately after them, almost like you're their shadow or their echo.
Okay, like speaking simultaneously.
That's one key part of it. The goal, as all the sources described it, is to mimic the sound as closely as humanly possible. You're not just saying the words.
They're trying to copy everything.
Everything. Their speed, their volume changes, their pitch going up and down, where they pause, which words they stress.
Where?
Even trying to capture the emotional tone if you can. You're aiming to be a vocal mirror.
Wow, okay. That sounds challenging.
It can be at first, which is why the sources recommend starting small. They provide a very practical, step-by-step approach. You don't try to shadow a whole movie right away.
Makes sense. So what's step one?
Step one, choose your material, but keep it short, really short, especially when you're starting. A few sentences from a TV show you like, maybe a 15-second clip from a YouTube video, a line or two from a speech, even just one sentence from a podcast recording.
Short and manageable. Got it.
Step two, listen carefully. Play that one sentence you've chosen.
Yeah.
Listen really intently. Focus on all those things we talked about. The intonation, the stress, the connected sounds, the rhythm. Just listen, maybe a couple of times.
Okay. Absorb the sound.
Then pause the audio. Now it's your turn. Try to repeat that sentence out loud, but don't just say the words. Try to copy the delivery you just heard as precisely as possible.
So try to match the melody, the rhythm, how the words linked.
Exactly. Did their voice go up at the end? Copy that. Did they stress a particular word? Stress the same word. Did want to become wanna? You say wanna. Try to replicate the original sound. And don't worry about perfection at first. Just try. Do this repeat after pausing maybe 2 or 3 times for that one sentence.
Okay, listen. Pause. Repeat. Trying to mimic.
Step 3. Now for the actual shadowing part. Play the audio of that same sentence again. But this time, try to speak at the exact same time as the original speaker.
Whoa, okay. Simultaneously.
Yeah. You're aiming to be their echo, starting maybe a fraction of a second behind them or right on top of them. You're trying to match their timing, their rhythm, their intonation as it happens.
That sounds like it forces you to really process the sound and produce it almost instantly.
It does. It really links the listening and speaking functions in real time. It's intense, but incredibly effective.
One of the sources used that great example from the TV show Friends.
Oh yeah, Ross saying we were on a break.
Exactly. It's perfect for this because it's not just what he says, it's how he says it. That specific, iconic, frustrated kind of whiny tone.
Totally. The stress is clearly on break. The intonation goes up and down in a very particular way.
So shadowing that wouldn't just be saying the words, we were on a break.
No way. It would involve listening really carefully to that specific delivery, then pausing and trying to replicate that sound, that emotion, that intonation yourself.
Okay, trying to get the whiny frustration in there.
You got it. And then playing the clip again and trying to say, we're on a break, right along with Ross, matching his timing in that very specific, exasperated tone.
I can see how doing that, even with just one sentence, could be a real workout.
It absolutely is. And repeating this whole process, listen, pause, repeat, simultaneous shadow over and over with different short clips is where the magic happens. Why? Because it's physical training.
Physical training for your mouth.
Yes. For your mouth, your tongue, your lips, your vocal cords, you are literally building muscle memory. One language coaching source we looked at drew a great parallel. They compared it to practicing scales on a piano or doing drills in basketball.
Right. You wouldn't expect to play Mozart beautifully just by watching a concert pianist.
Or sink a perfect free throw just by watching LeBron James. You have to do the physical work yourself. You have to practice the movements.
So shadowing is like doing vocal gymnastics.
Kind of. It trains the physical parts of your speech apparatus to actually form the sounds, the rhythms, the connections of English in a native-like way. And at the same time, it's constantly training your ear to notice the subtle differences between what you're producing and the native model you're shadowing.
So it bridges that gap between knowing how something should sound and actually being able to make that sound reliably.
Precisely. You might know intellectually how to make a D sound, but shadowing helps your mouth do it quickly and automatically within the flow of speech.
And the sources seem to agree that doing this kind of focused, active practice, even if it's just for, say, 10 or 15 minutes a day, is way more effective for improving pronunciation and fluency.
Than hours and hours of just passive listening or reading grammar rules. Absolutely. Far more effective for actually changing how you sound.
It's that deliberate, focused repetition, like any skill.
Exactly. Shadowing makes that practice deliberate and targeted.
Okay, so we're training the ear with focused listening, training the mouth with shadowing. What about the actual words we choose to use?
Yes. The next crucial layer, the sources highlighted for sounding truly natural. Enriching your vocabulary with the kinds of phrases and expressions native speakers actually use in everyday conversation.
This is different from just learning more words from a dictionary.
It is. While having a wide vocabulary is obviously important, sounding natural isn't just about knowing lots of individual words. It's also about using the common combinations of words, the set phrases, the idioms, the conversational fillers that pepper native speech.
Things that maybe don't translate perfectly word for word from your own language?
Often, yes. And things that aren't always the main focus in traditional textbooks, which sometimes lean towards more formal or grammatically pure structures.
Right. So you could be perfectly grammatically correct, but if you only use very formal or textbook-style phrases all the time,
your English might sound a little stiff or maybe unnatural. One article described it vividly, saying it could sound a bit like a robot assembling sentences based on rules rather than a person having a fluid conversation.
ouch. Okay, so we want to sound like a person, not a rule-assembling robot.
Exactly. It's about using those word combinations that just feel right and flow naturally for native speakers.
The sources must have given examples here, too.
Oh, definitely. Really practical ones. They took basic common functions like agreeing or disagreeing or saying you don't know and showed how native speakers typically use a variety of natural phrases beyond the most basic textbook answer.
Okay, let's take agreeing. The basic phrase is, I agree, which is fine, right?
Perfectly correct. Nothing wrong with it grammatically. But if that's the only way you ever express agreement, especially in casual chat, it could start to sound a bit repetitive, maybe a touch too formal sometimes.
So what are some more natural alternatives the sources suggested?
Well, for enthusiastic agreement, especially in informal settings, you hear things like totally all the time.
Right. Someone says, that concert was amazing, and you reply, totally. Much more natural than I agree that the concert was amazing.
Exactly. Or another really common one is exactly.
When would you use that?
When someone says something that perfectly captures what you were thinking or feeling. This project is taking way too long. Exactly. That's what I've been saying. It shows strong, precise agreement.
Feels much more dynamic than just I agree.
It does. Or if you want to express really strong agreement, a very common and natural phrase is, I couldn't agree more.
I couldn't agree more. That really emphasizes it.
Yeah, it means you are in complete agreement. We need to change our strategy. I couldn't agree more. Very natural way to show full support for an idea.
So just having these options, totally,
Right.
exactly. I couldn't agree more, already makes your agreements sound more varied and natural.
Definitely. And they gave similar examples for the opposite, like expressing uncertainty or saying you don't know.
Okay, the basic is I don't know. Again, perfectly fine.
Fine. But native speakers have lots of other ways to say it. A really common one is, I have no idea.
I have no idea. How is that different from I don't know?
It often carries a bit more emphasis, like you really don't know, perhaps implying you feel you should know, or you're surprised you don't. Where did I leave my keys? I have no idea.
Got it. More emphatic ignorance.
Kind of. Or for a slightly softer, maybe more thoughtful way of saying you don't know, you often hear phrases like, I'm not sure, to be honest.
Adding that, to be honest, that feels very conversational.
It really does. It softens the, I don't know, a bit. Makes it sound less abrupt. Will it rain tomorrow? I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay. And then there was that fun, informal one.
Beats me.
Beats me.
Right.
Classic informal, especially American English.
Very much so. It means I don't know, and I find it puzzling or inexplicable. It implies a shrug, a sense of your guess is as good as mine.
Why is the printer not working again? Beats me.
Perfect example. Definitely one for casual situations with friends or colleagues you know well. Not something you'd likely say in a very formal report.
Right. Context is key there.
Always. But the main point the sources are making is that actively learning these kinds of natural phrases and expressions, noticing them when you listen to native speakers, maybe keeping a notebook of them, and then consciously trying to use them in your own conversations.
That's crucial for sounding more authentic.
Absolutely paramount.
Yeah.
It stops your English from sounding like a direct, sometimes awkward translation from your first language. It makes it sound more like you're actually thinking and speaking in English, using the common, ready-made building blocks that native speakers rely on.
One source called them lexical chunks, right?
Exactly. Lexical chunks, prefabricated multi-word units. Things like, by the way, on the other hand, as far as I know, nice to meet you, how's it going? Native speakers access these instantly as whole units.
They don't build them word by word each time?
Generally not. And learners benefit hugely from learning and using these chunks too. It adds a layer of fluency and naturalness that just knowing individual words and grammar rules can't quite provide on its own.
So it's like stocking your linguistic toolbox not just with individual screwdrivers and wrenches, but also with those handy multi-tools that do common jobs really efficiently.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You need both. But those multi-tools, those lexical chunks, are what native speakers grab for everyday tasks all the time.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we're listening better, we're practicing the shadowing, we're building our arsenal of natural phrases. Sounds like a good plan. But are there things we should watch out for? Common mistakes learners make when they're trying to do all this?
Yes, absolutely. The sources were quite helpful in pointing out some common pitfalls. Knowing what not to do can be just as important as knowing what to do. Saves you time and frustration.
Good point. So what's pitfall number one?
The first big one they highlighted is something you see, or rather hear quite often. Learners trying to speak too fast.
The speed demon approach. Like, if I just talk really, really quickly, I'll sound fluent and native.
Exactly that misconception. There's this idea that equates speed directly with fluency or native-like ability. But the sources were unanimous. True fluency isn't primarily about sheer speed.
What is it about then?
It's much more about the smoothness of your speech, the rhythm, the appropriate use of pauses, and overall clarity.
Okay, so rushing isn't the goal.
Definitely not. In fact, trying to force speed before you've really mastered the individual sounds, the connected speech patterns, and the natural rhythm of English often backfires badly.
How so?
It usually leads to mumbled speech, unclear pronunciation, tripping over words, even making more grammatical mistakes because your brain can't keep up. Instead of sounding fluent, you just sound rushed and hard to understand.
Right. If you try to say, I'm going to go to the store super fast, but haven't practiced that gonna reduction in the flow.
It might just come out as, I'm gonna got the store. a garbled mess. Native speakers often sound fast, not because they're talking at lightning speed, but because their words connect smoothly and they use those reductions efficiently. The flow makes it seem quick.
So the advice is, focus on clear articulation, getting the rhythm right, using connected speech appropriately first. Speed will come naturally later as you get more comfortable. Don't force it.
Precisely. Clarity and rhythm over raw speed. That's what sounds natural.
Okay, good warning. What's another common pitfall?
This one relates directly to those natural phrases we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Overusing slang or using it inappropriately.
Ah, okay. So learning slang is good, but too much is bad.
It's more nuanced than that. Learning and understanding some current slang is definitely useful, especially for understanding informal conversations, movies, music, and maybe connecting with younger native speakers in very casual settings.
Oh.
But deliberately trying to cram your speech full of every new slang term you hear or using slang in the wrong context can make you sound really unnatural, even awkward.
Like you're trying too hard.
Exactly. Like you're trying too hard to be cool or fit in, but you don't quite get the nuances. One source painted a funny picture of a learner trying to force phrases like, yo, bro, what up? That presentation was totally lit, fam, into a formal business meeting.
Haha, okay, yeah. That would definitely sound out of place, more than a little forced.
Totally forced. While maybe, just maybe, some version of that phrase might be used authentically within a very specific small group of friends, using it broadly or in the wrong setting just screams, I learned this from the internet and don't know when to use it.
So context is absolutely crucial with slang and highly informal language.
Paramount. You need to ask yourself, where did I hear this phrase? Who said it? Who are they talking to? What was the situation? Was it a joke? Is it specific to a certain age group or region?
Understanding the social rules around the slang is as important as knowing the meaning.
Absolutely. The sources generally advised caution. It's usually much better to stick with more neutral, widely understood natural phrases like the totally or I have no idea, we discussed and use them correctly, than it is to overuse trendy or edgy slang incorrectly.
Aim for natural, not necessarily for cool through forced slang.
Good way to put it. Authenticity over trying too hard.
Okay, pitfall number 2, avoided. What else? Is there a third major one?
Yes, and this one is possibly the most critical, something that multiple sources really emphasized, almost with a sense of urgency. It's the pitfall of not practicing speaking out loud.
Ah, spending all your time listening, reading, studying, but not actually talking.
Exactly. So many learners are incredibly diligent. They spend hours with apps, textbooks, watching videos, listening to podcasts. They absorb a huge amount of input.
Which is great, right? Input is essential.
Input is absolutely essential, but they often shy away from the actual physical act of producing the sounds of English themselves. Maybe they feel self-conscious or they don't have anyone to talk to, or they just think listening is enough.
But it's not enough.
It's not enough for improving your speaking, especially pronunciation and fluency. This goes right back to that idea of physical training we talked about with shadowing.
The gym for your voice idea.
Exactly. Listening trains your ear and comprehension. Reading trains your textual understanding. Studying grammar helps you build correct sentences. But none of those activities physically train your mouth, your tongue, your jaw, your vocal cords to actually make the English sounds, rhythms, and connections accurately, smoothly, and automatically.
You have to build the muscle memory for speaking by actually speaking.
Precisely. You might know perfectly well intellectually that the English sherry sound is different from the R in your native language. But if you never physically practice making that English air sound over and over again out loud,
your mouth won't be able to do it automatically when you're trying to talk.
Exactly. You'll likely revert to your native sound without even realizing it. Your mouth needs the workout. It needs the repetition. The sources were adamant. Listening alone, no matter how many thousands of hours you do, will not significantly improve your pronunciation or your physical fluency. You have to practice output. You have to make the sounds.
Even if it's just talking to yourself.
Absolutely. Talking to yourself, reading passages out loud, doing shadowing exercises, recording yourself and listening back. Anything that involves physically producing the language is crucial. It's non-negotiable if you want to improve how you sound.
Okay, that's a really strong point. So the 3 big pitfalls to avoid are trying to speak too fast, focus on clarity and rhythm instead, overusing or misusing slang, be context aware, stick to more neutral, natural phrases, and the biggest one, neglecting to practice speaking out loud, make active production a priority.
Get those right, avoid those traps, and the effort you put into listening and learning phrases will actually translate into sounding more natural.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The sources also brought up something really interesting, kind of a deeper layer to all this. The cultural significance embedded in how we speak English.
Yes, this was fascinating. It moves beyond just getting the sounds right for clarity and into how our vocal delivery, the way we use our voice, actually influences social perception within English-speaking cultures.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it affects how people see you.
Very much so, according to these sources. Things like your typical tone of voice, your intonation patterns, even whether you use comma reductions or not, can subconsciously signal things to native listeners.
Signal things like what?
Well, things like your perceived confidence level, your friendliness, your sincerity, your enthusiasm. Even detecting things like sarcasm or irony often depends heavily on tone and intonation, not just the words.
Okay, so if someone speaks English perfectly grammatically, but maybe in a very flat monotone.
In some English-speaking contexts, yeah, that monotone delivery might be unintentionally perceived as uninterested, maybe lacking confidence, or even unfriendly, depending on the situation, even if the speaker doesn't feel that way at all.
Wow. So mastering the music isn't just about sounding natural, it's also about sending the right social signals.
That seems to be a key part of it. Let's revisit intonation, that rise and fall of the voice. The sources brought up that simple question, how are you? Again, in this context.
Right. How does intonation play a cultural role there?
Well, if you ask, how are you, with a completely flat, robotic intonation.
Like how are you?
Yeah. To a native English speaker, that can sound really perfunctory, like you're just reading a script and don't actually care about the answer. It might feel insincere or even a bit cold,
Even though the words are polite.
even though the words themselves aren't a polite question. But if you ask, how are you, with a more typical friendly intonation, maybe a slight rise on R and then falling on U, delivered with a generally warm vocal quality.
How are you? Like that.
Exactly. That immediately sounds much more natural, warmer, more welcoming. It signals genuine, or at least culturally appropriate, interest and friendliness. It fulfills the social function of the greeting.
So learning those typical intonation contours for questions, statements, exclamations in English is key, not just for clarity, but for conveying the intended social meaning and emotion.
Precisely. You're learning how to perform politeness, enthusiasm, concern, etc., in a way that's recognizable and natural within that cultural context.
And what about reductions? Things like gonna and wanna. Did the sources connect those to culture too?
They did, particularly in the context of casual American English, where reductions are very common. They frame them not just as ways to speak more efficiently, but almost as markers of informal group membership.
How so? Like using them helps you blend in.
Kind of. Using common reductions like gonna, wanna, have to, gotta, dunno appropriately in casual conversation signals that you're comfortable with the informal, natural flow of the language. It helps you sound less like an outsider reading from a textbook and more like someone who's in the know about how people actually talk.
So while you might choose not to use them in a very formal speech or writing,
Right, you probably say going to or want to in those formal contexts.
using them in everyday chat makes you sound more relaxed, more natural, more part of the conversational flow.
That's the idea presented. It's like knowing when to wear jeans and a t-shirt versus a suit and tie. Both are correct clothes, but one fits the context better and signals a certain level of informality and ease. Using reductions appropriately in casual speech can signal a similar kind of linguistic ease.
That's a really interesting perspective. It makes understanding and using these features feel even more important.
It does. The sources really drove home that paying close attention to all these features when you listen to the tone, the specific intonation patterns used for different communicative functions, the common reductions in connected speech, it's how you build up the knowledge base. You learn not just the language, but the culturally embedded way of presenting that language through sound.
So it adds this whole extra dimension to the learning journey. It's not just about vocabulary and grammar lists.
No, it's about understanding the signals you send with your voice, beyond just the dictionary meaning of the words. It's deeply tied into how communication works in English-speaking societies.
Wow, okay. We have covered a ton of ground here, really pulling out the key techniques and insights from all these sources.
Yeah, we've gone from focused listening
Right, tuning the ear to tone, rhythm, connected speech,
to active production with shadowing
that vocal mirroring technique.
to stocking your phrase book with natural expressions.
Totally. Beats me. Huh, all those.
And then avoiding those common traps like speaking too fast or misusing slang.
And the crucial need to practice out loud.
And finally, understanding that cultural layer, how sound carries social meaning.
It's a lot to take in, but hopefully really practical. So now comes the crucial part, putting this knowledge into practice.
Absolutely. Listening to us talk about it is one thing. Doing it is where the real learning happens.
Okay.
So we've got a challenge for you listening.
Yes, a few concrete, actionable steps you can take, like right now, based on everything we've just discussed.
Don't just let this deep dive wash over you. Pick one or two things and actually try them today or tomorrow. That's how you build momentum.
Okay, here's the challenge, broken down into 3 manageable steps. Ready?
Let's hear it.
Step 1. Find a short piece of English audio or video, something you find interesting, maybe a minute long or even less to start. Remember, short is good. A scene from a show, a news clip, a bit of a podcast, an interview on YouTube, anything with native speakers talking naturally.
Got it. Find your source material, short and sweet.
Step 2. From that clip, pick out just one sentence. Seriously, just one to start. Listen to it carefully several times, then really focus and practice shadowing that one sentence using the technique we laid out.
So listen, pause and repeat, trying to match the sound exactly, then play it again and try to speak simultaneously with the original speaker.
Yes. Pour all your focus into matching their intonation, their rhythm, how their words connect, just for that single sentence. Do it over and over for maybe 5 minutes. Really drill down on that one sentence.
Okay, intensive shadowing on a micro level. I like it.
Step 3. Think back to those natural, everyday phrases we talked about, the alternatives for I agree, like totally, or I couldn't agree more, or for I don't know, like I have no idea, or beats me, or maybe you notice another useful phrase while doing your listening practice.
Right, pick one.
Pick just one new natural phrase that you learned or reviewed today, and make a commitment. Try to use that one phrase in a real situation sometime today or tomorrow.
Could be with a language exchange partner, or in a class, or chatting with a native speaker friend if you have one.
Or even just consciously using it. If you're practicing speaking English out loud to yourself, the point is to take it off the page or out of your head and actually activate it. Put it into use.
Those 3 steps. Find short audio, shadow one sentence intensely, use one new natural phrase. Seems doable.
Totally doable, right? They might seem like really small steps. Shadowing just one sentence, using just one new phrase.
But that's the point. It's the consistent practice of these micro skills day after day that builds up the macro skill of sounding more natural over time. It's exactly like a fitness plan.
You don't go to the gym once and expect to be super fit.
Exactly. It's the consistency with those small, manageable exercises that leads to the big results down the road.
And hey, as you're doing this, maybe take a moment to think. Is there a particular native English speaker whose way of speaking you really admire?
Good question. Could be anyone. An actor whose voice you like, a news anchor who sounds clear and engaging, a YouTuber, a podcaster.
Yeah, someone whose English just sounds really natural and pleasant to your ear. Identifying a kind of voice model like that can be really helpful.
How so?
Well, their interviews, shows, or videos can become a great source of material for your focused listening and your shadowing practice. It gives your practice a specific target sound to aim for.
Ah, makes sense. It gives you direction and maybe some extra motivation too. Find your voice hero.
Find your voice hero, I like that. And just a little heads up, our next deep dive is actually going to be the perfect follow-up to this one.
Oh yeah. What are we diving into next time?
We'll be focusing specifically on strategies for practicing your English speaking skills effectively, even when you don't have a conversation partner, how to make the most of practicing alone.
Ah, excellent. That addresses that third pitfall, directly the need for output, even solo. Very useful.
Exactly. So definitely stay tuned for that one.
In the meantime, keep doing the work based on today's dive. Keep listening actively. Keep observing how native speakers sound.
And most importantly, keep practicing speaking out loud. Experiment with shadowing. Try out those new phrases. Be brave.
It makes all the difference.
And maybe as you're doing all this practice, here's a final thought to ponder. Something that emerged from synthesizing these different sources we looked at.
Okay, leave us with something to chew on.
Think about this. That act of conscious imitation, the shadowing, the intense listening for the music of English, it isn't just about copying someone else's voice.
What else is it doing?
It's actually a really powerful way to internalize the fundamental patterns, the deep structure, the very pulse and rhythm of the language itself.
So by imitating the surface features, you're actually absorbing the underlying system.
That's the idea. It's not about erasing your own voice or your identity. Far from it. It's about acquiring the technical skills, the fluency with the how of English.
So that you can then express your authentic self, your thoughts, your personality more effectively and naturally within that system. By mastering the tools, you gain more freedom.
Exactly. By mastering the how of the language as it's really spoken, you unlock so many more possibilities for clearly and naturally conveying the who you are and the what you want to say.
It's a fascinating interplay, isn't it?
Yeah.
Learning the constraints and patterns actually gives you more freedom of expression within them.
It really is. The more you understand and feel that subtle music of English, the more freely, confidently, and authentically you can compose your own unique thoughts and ideas within it.
So keep exploring that music.
Yeah.
Keep listening for it. Keep trying to play it yourself. It's a journey.
Absolutely. Enjoy the process. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.